Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 13 Pro and iPhone 13 Pro Max have been out for a few days at this point, and I wanted to share with you some things to try and some best settings based on how I have my phone set up. Now, these things will work on the 13 and 13 mini, however, certain features such as ProMotion and camera and more are new to the 13 Pro and Pro Max, so some of these things will be specific to those devices. Now, the first thing is Apple's new ProMotion. A lot of us have wanted this for some time, 120 Hertz ProMotion that makes the display super smooth. And if you want to see the difference, you can actually do that by going into your settings, and if it doesn't matter to you, you can actually turn it off. So if you go into your settings, and then you go down to accessibility, and then you go to motion, you have the option to limit the frame rate. Limiting the frame rate will show you the difference between the smoothness of ProMotion and turning it off altogether. So you'll see if we turn this switch on here, it says sets the maximum frame rate of the display to 60 frames per second. Now, the great thing about ProMotion is it actually ramps up to 120 Hertz when needed and then goes down to 10 Hertz when not needed to save power. When it's at 60 frames, it can't go up to the higher limit, so it will actually save you a little bit of battery if you were scrolling through things. Now, if you switch this off and then you go back and switch it back on, I can definitely tell the difference between those two things. It's hard to see on camera, but in slow-mo, you can actually see the difference. So there is a definite big difference on that. Now, some other things I wanted to share with you is I would recommend keeping that on and trying it for a while, but some other things I would change have to do with the display itself. Under display and brightness, under your settings, there's a couple things that you may or may not like. I personally turn off True Tone because I want to see maybe what a photo looks like based on the photo, not based on the room light that I'm in. So turning on True Tone will adjust the display based on what the ambient light is like and trying to make white more of a paper white. I typically turn it off because I want accuracy all of the time instead of this adjusting on its own. If you like True Tone, of course, keep it on. If not, I would recommend turning it off. I typically leave it off. The same is true for night shift. If you want to edit photos or video, I would typically turn it off and then turn it back on as needed, or you can schedule it. However, I personally leave it off as I don't tend to like the way it makes the display look, or you can just turn it on and you'll see it just yellows there. I don't like the way that looks, but it's good for going to sleep, maybe getting ready for bed. Then you can turn it back on or leave it on scheduled. I typically turn those things off just to sort of make sure this is as accurate as possible since I'm using it as a tool to record video and take photos. Now, the other thing too you may want to take into consideration is auto lock. Now, currently I have it on never, so the screen doesn't lock by itself while I'm making this video. But under auto lock, I typically have it on 30 seconds. And the reason for that is it will save the most power. If I set the phone down, not only is it open and maybe a security risk, if I set the phone down, it will lock itself in 30 seconds. Obviously, you have different settings here, 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, 4, 5, or never, and use whatever's best for you. But if you're by yourself and you set your phone down, you can leave it. If not, I would recommend 30 seconds for the best battery life. Now, finally, to do with the display, under display and brightness at the top, you'll see that we have appearance, light or dark. I typically have this on automatic because I like it bright during the day, and at night I want to switch it to dark mode. This will save a little bit of battery, leaving the pixels black if it's on a true black display, but typically it's not a huge difference unless you have a lot of apps that are completely dark. Now, if you switch between light and dark, obviously there's a big difference, and some prefer one way, some prefer the other. I typically prefer automatic, so it switches based on time of day. At night, this will be dark. During the day, it will be light. So those are the settings I use for my display. Now, the next thing that's big in the 13 Pro and Pro Max is the cameras. The cameras are really great. In fact, I've used them quite a bit for a lot of the videos with unboxings and things in the past few days as I've been unboxing the iPhones. But the cameras have some settings that I typically change, and these, of course, can be customized to your liking. Under camera, if we go under camera, you'll see that it says photo, and then you have the new cinematic mode. The cinematic mode is something I would try out for sure if you haven't tried it already. It allows you to pick a subject afterward that's in focus, but it does only record in 1080p. So this is something I would recommend trying out and seeing how it is for you. But typically I would recommend trying it, see if it works. If it doesn't, it's basically like a portrait mode for video, but in only 1080p. But if you want that higher resolution, you'll need to go to your video mode. Now, under video modes, one thing that you may want to change has to do with your settings for the camera in general. Typically, one thing I change has to do with locking these settings how I leave them. So when you go into your camera, if you change a setting and then you go out and go back in, sometimes those settings actually revert back to something else. I want them to stay how I've had them all along. And so we can do that by going into our settings, and then we go down to our camera. Under camera, you'll see that we have preserve settings. Under preserve settings, you can see we have camera mode, creative controls, exposure adjustment, night mode, portrait zoom, Apple Pro RAW, and live photo. If we want to have the settings stay like we set them in the camera app itself, you'll want to turn these on. If they're not on, every time you leave the app, they'll revert back to something else. So I recommend turning that on, as it's something that bothers me quite a bit. Now, another thing I highly recommend trying is Apple's new macro mode on the Pro cameras. So if we go to photo, and as we get closer to maybe this iPhone here, you'll see that it switches to macro mode. It has this sort of jump where it senses that it's getting closer and closer, and then you can get about 2 centimeters away. But where it's most impressive is with maybe a cleaning cloth or a microfiber cloth. This goes to my Pro Display XDR, and as we get closer, we can get really, really close. Let's see how close we can get. We'll snap that photo, and using the processor and the neural engine, you'll see that we can see the littlest fibers within the microfiber cloth. It allows us to zoom right in and get up close to everything. I highly recommend trying this out. It also works in video modes, so if you want to get nice and close in video, we'll see if it jumps there. You can get nice and close in video and do the same thing. So you do have to reset sometimes by pulling back, but you have those new modes, which are really nice. Another thing you have that's great in this is new photo modes, or we have scenes. So if we go to this button here, which allows us to flip between different modes, you'll see we have a couple things here. This button right here is one of the new features, and this applies to the 13 and 13 mini as well. So if I bring in the iPhone 13 Pro, you'll see here we have different modes. So we can switch between them, between standard mode, maybe rich contrast, maybe vibrant, and it will stay on this mode as you set. And then you can adjust things such as tone, if we want it to be a little bit more or less vibrant, and it gives it a name, and then we'll switch to warmth. If we want it less warm or more warm or cool, you can leave it that way. And then it will stick every time you come back and take a photo. These are not filters, but they're rather sort of cinematic modes or photo styles that will give you this look and keep the look that you prefer so that you can post it on social media, whether that be Instagram or YouTube or somewhere else. Now, another thing I personally change is with the photo mode as far as its aspect ratio. So you'll see it says 4:3. I prefer 16:9, and this allows me to frame different thumbnails for YouTube in the way that they'll look. YouTube wants 16:9 thumbnails, so I typically set it up like this: 16:9, frame the photo, take a photo, and now it's framed perfectly. I don't have to go in later and then crop it. So it's something that allows me to see the entire frame the way I want it to see when it's done. So that's something that I recommend. If that works for you, then you can post it, whether that be on YouTube or Instagram or somewhere else, or keep it at 4:3 or square. Whatever works for you, you have the option. But because we set those settings earlier to have the camera settings stick, when we leave, if I set it to 16:9, leave the camera app, go back in, it will still be on 16:9. Now, the next thing I would recommend doing is, if you haven't had this turned on already, is to preserve some battery life or preserve the health of your battery overall. I would go to your settings, then battery. Under battery health, make sure optimized battery charging is turned on. This will learn the patterns of your charging, and then you can charge at night if you'd like to. Leave it on the charger. It will ramp up to 80%, and then it will hold at 80% until it's closer to the time you normally wake up, and then it will continue to 100%. That way it doesn't keep the battery at 100%, which typically degrades it a little bit more quickly over time if it stays at 100%. It will keep it at 80, so I typically recommend turning that on. Then you don't have to manage anything. iPhone can manage it. Now, other than the optimized battery setting, I typically turn off background app refresh as well. And the reason for this is it will refresh all of the app data in the background and continue to use power. Now, if it's an app that you use regularly, maybe you're opening up YouTube regularly, you may want to leave it on. However, I typically just turn it off because it saves the most amount of power, and it's not something that I typically value. However, it's possible that it could save a little bit of power if you're going into that same app over and over, but I typically turn that off myself. Now, there's a couple other settings I would recommend changing, and if you go into settings and go into your cellular settings, under your cellular data options, it's on 5G auto, which is typically pretty good overall. However, if you're someone that doesn't have access to maybe Wi-Fi regularly, I would customize this. So either leave it on auto. If you don't have 5G in your area, you'll save some battery by switching to LTE. But if you go back and go to data mode, allow more data on 5G, this will allow you to prefer 5G over Wi-Fi and use it for software updates, automatic iCloud backups, and higher quality media. So if you don't have access to Wi-Fi regularly, flip this on. Now you can do updates over 5G. So it's great if you have that option available. Now, another thing Apple has added with iOS 15 that I would recommend turning on if you haven't already is under settings, go down to music. Under music, there's new Dolby Atmos, which was added, which is basically spatial audio. I leave it on automatic since it's based on whether or not the music has capabilities of that. And if you're using Apple Music, I would adjust the audio quality as well. You have lossless audio now, which will give you the best quality, but you want to make sure that you optimize this for your cellular streaming, because over cellular, it uses a lot of data and sometimes even slows down or skips. So I typically leave it on high quality or lossless. I would not use high res lossless when you're streaming over your internet connection. If you're using Wi-Fi, then it's fine, but I typically don't recommend leaving that on the highest quality over 5G or streaming. For downloads, I typically turn it on to high-res downloads since I want to use the best quality possible. Now, you may not be able to hear this unless you have proper headphones wired into it, but it definitely makes a difference in the quality overall, and at least leave it on lossless so you get the best experience. If you're using a lot of data and you're worried about that, make sure you flip that to high quality instead. Now, just a moment ago, I mentioned iCloud backup, and that's another thing I would recommend turning on. It will back up everything on your phone, and then if you lose your phone, need to get a new phone, you can just seamlessly move over to the new one, and it's very simple to do. So if you go into your account at the top of settings, tap on iCloud, and under iCloud, you'll see iCloud backup. Now, you may need to purchase more data. I need to clear some out here. You'll see I have the 2 terabyte plan, and I have all of my family on this, and they're backing everything up. So it's great to have that. We don't have to worry about it. I would at least turn it on and consider maybe getting the next tier up, as it's about $1 a month for the next level up of iCloud storage. Now, you don't have to do this, and you don't have to back up over cellular. You can also use iTunes to back up as well, but I would recommend doing that and turning on iCloud Photo Library as well if you want to back up your photos. There are other options out there, but this typically is a no worry situation, and it just you can let you know when to back up. You can back up now. This was backed up at 3:14 a.m. last night. If you want to back up now, you can. And I know that all of my data is here, including all of my app settings and everything else. I typically recommend turning that on. Now, another thing I would recommend trying is a focus mode. Prior to this, with iOS 14, we had Do Not Disturb, but focus modes can be incredibly helpful based on where you're located. And I have an in-depth video about how to fully configure this. But if you haven't tried this out, you can change it so that it configures automatically and changes your home screens. So you can fully customize your home screen with iOS 15. Just press and hold, go into jiggle mode as they call it, tap here, and you can move around your home screens and make them on or off based on your focus mode. And then you can also have certain people contact you during the focus mode that you're on, as well as notifications turned off and everything else. They're super helpful, and I highly recommend trying them out if you haven't tried them out already. And if you don't like them, that's fine, but you can go in and configure them and pick one that works for you, whether that be gaming, personal, reading, or more. And I'll link the video that I talk about how to configure this in the description below. Now, the final thing I would recommend turning on, if you haven't already, is if you have an Apple Watch and you want to unlock your phone, maybe you're wearing a mask and your face is obstructed, you can have your watch signal to your iPhone to unlock based off of biometrics on your wrist. And you will need a secured passcode on your Apple Watch for this to work. So first, make sure you have a password turned on the Apple Watch, and then go over to your settings. Under Settings, go down to Face ID and Passcode. Once you have that turned on, scroll down and turn on Unlock with Apple Watch. Once you have this setting turned on, it will just work, and then you can obscure your face and it will unlock when it's doing that. I used this quite a bit the other day and it worked really well. You'll feel a little haptic feedback on your wrist when it unlocks, and it works really, really well. So I highly recommend doing it. Just remember, you will need a passcode turned on your watch for it to work, though. It won't work otherwise. And so those are the first things I would try with your new iPhone 13 Pro or 13 Pro Max, as well as settings that I would configure or try yourself. Let me know which one's your favorite new feature of the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. And of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description. This is the stock Pro wallpaper. And if you don't have it on your current phone, I'll leave it so you can check it out yourself. If you haven't subscribed already, though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.